In our lifetime, we're going to see such drastic change. And so we have to be open to that, and we can be pragmatic about it, but we have to be open to it because it's going to significantly change in our lifetime. And I personally am very excited about that.
Welcome to the Schmidt List, the podcast for people dedicated to managing successful projects, developing impactful products, and building engaged teams. And now, here's your host, Kurt Schmidt.
Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Kurt.
I am going to do my best to keep this under 14 hours because I know you and I can talk for quite a while.
We'll just riff until the batteries die.
Until they shut off the lights.
Yeah, it's fine.
We'll just keep going. So you're at Fallon. Tell me about what you do. How did you get into what you're doing? And what's your job these days?
Yeah, so today I lead digital, social, and innovation at Fallon, which is very big.
That's a lot of
legacy
stuff.
Creative agency here in town. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially more than TV. We are excellent at making video and for TV and online. Mm-hmm. And part of me and my role and my team's role is to kind of bring the rest of it. And increasingly that means online or mobile mm-hmm. or an Alexa skill or, we're hacking Raspberry Pis, that sort of thing.
Yeah, right.
It's super fun.
So you and I have talked a lot extensively in the past, not only about just marketing in today's world and how that's changed, but also like how the teams and things have changed as well. So one thing I want to talk to you about is this idea of the attention economy, right? You hear like folks like Gary Vaynerchuk and folks talking about like the thank you economy and the jab and right mm-hmm. hook and the attention economy, right? So how has that in your mind like changed consumer habits in the last decade?
If you're a marketer or you're in business, there's really one thing that matters first. Like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have to have food and water and then clothes mm-hmm. before you can worry about how your hair looks.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
So if you're a marketer in 2019, you have to care about where people's attention is, what they care about, and then how do you insert yourself or your brand into that. So what that means is if you ask an average person on the street or if you just look at their browsing habits, what they're consuming is not usually advertisements or PR articles. And in fact, what you'll see is they're actually consuming an embarrassing amount of listicles and what kind of Harry Potter character am I and comfort content. Right? And so then you have your brand, which wants to talk about its brand and then its product or its service. Mm-hmm. And how do those two Venn diagrams cross? And that's really where I love spending time. Tim Wu has written an excellent book called The Attention Merchants. And his theory is that you, Kurt, and I, mm-hmm. so we are attention merchants and we spend our days day trading attention. So in order to actually leverage that for clients or for our company, mm-hmm. we have to pay attention to how those habits are changing. So people spending more time on their phone or second screening while they watch television, mm-hmm. right? And that also means sometimes you don't get why they're spending their time on their phones. So, for example, there's research last week that said 9 million people play Candy Crush for 3 hours or more a day. Candy Crush, right? So I'm at dinner with my family and I'm like, hey, like, did you hear this ridiculous stat? All these people are playing Candy Crush. And my wife's like, I played Candy Crush today. Right. And so this is where like you have to remove yourself from being judgmental or mm-hmm. like how you personally feel about Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. And you have to understand how the masses or your specific target audience, how they're spending their attention. And if they are playing Candy Crush, if they like to play games that have a casino-like environment that maintain their attention, then what's your brand doing to break through that? Mm. How are you getting there?
Let's say I'm an old school brand. I'm used to telling everybody what you should be thinking and feeling and talking about. I said it in an episode not too long ago, like choosy moms choose Jif. So I'm telling you why you should buy my peanut butter. Mm-hmm. And I'm creating the persona. But what you're saying is like these days people have to merge traffic with what is already being used and what is existing and mm-hmm. find their niche inside of it, right?
And without sacrificing who you are to the point of being of earning that attention, right? So we don't I don't want to do a quiz of what kind of peanut butter I am. In fact, I'll avoid that. But I do need, like, if I'm merchandising a peanut butter brand, I do need to pay attention to what's trending today, whether I like it or not, whether I respect this. So today is the phenomenon of people aging themselves with this app called FaceApp, right? And so you see everywhere all over the internet, and then this whole conversation about where that data is going. So there's like a secondary news cycle. You have whatever Donald Trump is doing. Donald Trump is the number one competitor for your brand, period. Whether you are a consumer brand or a B2B brand, your number one competitor in communications is Donald Trump. And again, we don't have to like it, but he is a master at dominating news cycles and dominating feeds. So Facebook's research says that on our phones, we scroll an average of 300 feet a day.
Wow.
So that's as tall as the Statue of Liberty. So what is your brand doing to stop that scroll? We call it thumb stopping attention, right? It's like buzzword bingo, right? But you were actually competing with that. And so one of my favorite things to do is like a party trick is to have everyone open Facebook on their phones and then pass your phone to the left, and we'll all look at each other's feeds. Because what tends to happen as a communicator and a student of the communication arts is I also get sucked into my content, my feeds, my algorithms. And I want to see what, a single mom, what her feed looks like, a Gen X single mom, or a married baby boomer, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and like really understand like what we're competing with for them, because it's different. And a lot of times you have to get over the fact of like get over yourself. Right? Yeah, like maybe I don't appreciate that this person is consuming that content, but I'm competing with it. So I want to know. And like that's one place that your attention is. Also, like here in town, we have the Minnesota Twins, right? So competition for the Minnesota Twins for a baseball game is not the Timberwolves NBA team or the MLS soccer team. Competition is going to a movie, or maybe I got to mow my lawn, or maybe Netflix. I want to watch Stranger Things. Exactly, right? And so they're competing on an attention level in a way that they have to think about. People don't just want to come to a baseball game; they have a limited slot for entertainment. And as a brand, we know we have limited slots to reach people. Right? But Hulu's new research shows that people would rather pay less money a month and still watch ads than more money a month and not have ads. So we're also conditioned to consume advertising.
Right.
And I'm not personally a huge fan of commercials or watching advertising, even though I work at a company that makes that.
Right.
But I also know that if the content is really good and if the insight is right there and the placement is perfect, I'd rather have that ad be relevant to me than be something I'm not interested in.
So let's say I'm a boring brand, or my product is not super sexy, or I work in higher education, or I pull out learning LMS systems or things like that. Like I can't just go and get Kim Kardashian to post me on Instagram, right? Like, where do I start? Where do I start figuring out like that? You mentioned, I really like how you said merge traffic, like merge into like that field. Like, where do you start finding that information? Like, what's the tools? What's the cadence?
It's a great question, because a lot of times you've already registered your Instagram account because it's free.
Sure.
And you're like, so we got to post content on Instagram. And it's like, if you're a very niche B2B brand, like maybe you don't. And so it really comes down to like, what's your business strategy? What's your lead cycle? How many touch points do you need over how much time? And then where should those touch points be in your connection strategy? And it could be that a free Instagram account posting organic content is part of that. I'm guessing it's not.
Yeah. And
that doesn't mean if you are interested and excited about building a community and sharing content, you shouldn't do it. But at the end of the year, you're going to look at where's the ROI of all of our activities. And a lot of times the things that seem free or low cost actually consume a lot of your time.
And then waste it, right?
Exactly. And now you're like anti-Instagram, whereas it was probably just misplaced in your
just
hierarchy.
Wasn't a good fit in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if I'm, let's switch gears then. Let's say I'm a startup or something, and I'm listening to the show, and I've got this new product or something like that, and I want to get some attention. I want a growth hack. I'm using air quotes, as they say. How do you build that plan? Like, where do you, we're sitting in front of a whiteboard right now. Where does Greg start? coming up with that plan for them.
So you want to think of what are your key milestones. So within the calendar year, where do you want that huge spike of attention to be? Because you got to have always on, you got to have your always on marketing, probably a little search, probably maybe some targeted social ads. And again, like if you've never scrolled to the bottom of Facebook on desktop and clicked on advertise, you have to go do that. And like click on that button and you dig into those audience insights and you start to segment like age and monetary income and interest level, and you realize, wow, I can actually spend $50 and reach the exact person I want to with a message, right? But that's really always on. That's really your like core, gotta do, low-hanging fruit. And then you're going to need some spikes throughout the year. So what are those? We call them tentpole moments, right? Again, we're going to win buzzword bingo today. It's like, what are those spikes? And is it seasonal? Is it around what your audience likes? And then what else is going on in the world that could be your competition? And think of like, how can you use that for good? Use that to get attention. And this is really where PR comes into play. A lot of public relations is not necessarily measurable, right? Like how do you measure the impressions or that sort of thing? Mm-hmm. But if you can tie it to like a really smart digital foundational strategy where you have to go to a website to get more information, or I read an article and then and I search for something, you can start to track it all the way through. So now we're measuring PR, which to me, like, so PR is earned engagement. It again is one of those like free, quote unquote, free things that you do need to invest in, but that that's going to be for if I have a new brand or I'm a growing brand, I'm going to have my always on things, and then what are those tentpole moments throughout the year?
If you're like you're saying, those tentpole moments are something that are part of my business plan, right? That is something I've designed. Right? It's not
an accident.
Yeah,
and it's not a like, oh, everyone's posting old pictures of themselves on Twitter, we should do that too. That's fine if you're having fun, but that's not going to drive your business.
Yeah, I think, again, and talking specifically just from experience, like with Foundry here, our social media is really gained towards recruiting and kind of expressing our culture and things. It's not really a sales tactic by any means. It's a way to celebrate our culture in a way. And I think to your point, I mean, since we primarily are B2B, having an Instagram account that just talks about like work, it's like, who cares? Because I think what's more interesting is how we get the work done, and showing that I think also helps for us from a recruitment standpoint. Because I get people all the time asking me like, how are you hiring, so many people? Like, it's such a deficit in finding good technical and design resources these days. And part of it is, we get a lot of folks that come in and say, oh, I checked out the Instagram and the Twitter and Facebook, and it looks like a fun place to work.
Yeah, this week, so I'm a strategic advisor at BrainJolt, which is a viral media publisher based in LA. And this week we had everyone come in from a remote company. Everybody come to LA to do what we called BrainJolt Camp. And then we had group photos, and we had some kind of hackathons and challenges, and all of our social channels were all of that, right? And it's showing activity and energy, and it's not about that end product. It's about the culture of the company, and then ultimately, like you said, recruiting. So that is content that will feed the long tail, the long cycle of your company and how people think of you, which ultimately should improve the quality of talent that you're recruiting for.
So that's the part where I like, this is a great segue, because I want to talk about working with clients and working with leadership in general, because a lot of those folks are not necessarily social savvy, right? And many of them might think of it either maybe not as harsh as a fad or something, but it has been rare that I found that leader that's like, this is a critical part of our business. More so like, well, I just heard a lot of people say we have to do this. And I mean, what's your first words to those folks when you're trying to convince them of the value of this type of work?
So I've really changed as a human being and a leader in the last 4 or 5 years, where I've grown in empathy for some of those leaders who maybe they were late or never sign-ups for social media, right? So I have a slide that I use in my keynote presentations that says social media is legacy media now. Facebook is 15 years old, right? Twitter is 14. I'll get the numbers wrong. Snapchat is 6 years old. So this is not new and emerging media, test and learn. Facebook is literally 15 years old, is driving business for multi-million-dollar companies. And if you're working with a leader, whether client side or in your own company, who never signed up for Facebook and didn't get it before, it can be really frustrating that they didn't get it now. So I'm trying to grow an empathy of, I thought I wouldn't have a job anymore, right? I thought like, well, everyone will just get digital and social and then we'll have to move on to something else. And like, they didn't. And so it's understanding like, well, why are their arms crossed to begin with? Why didn't they? And to me, it comes down to your first exposure to computers, your first exposure to cell phones, and then third is your first exposure to social media, period. So for me, that was more bulletin boards, or for my wife, it was like AOL instant messaging, like being able to communicate back and forth. The majority of baby boomers got their first text message as the text announcing Barack Obama's vice presidential candidate. And it sent in batches because it was early days. And so you're already hearing about it on the news, and 5 hours later you get a text message. Yeah, right. And you're just like, oh, this is bad technology. And it actually like severely damages how you view social media. So TikTok is the hottest social media network right now. It's the fastest growing. We all, modern marketers, should be signing up for TikTok and experimenting with it, at least tuning in. But I've had leaders say, well, yeah, but you told me to sign up for Vine, and then Vine died. So, like, let me just wait and see. And what I would argue is, well, Vine was around for 4 years. Vine pioneered the idea of looping content, or we call them boomerangs now on Instagram. It's like a standard thing. So even though maybe Vine isn't around, you can learn about behavior.
Well, and a lot of the really most popular Vine people went on to other platforms and even grew more, right?
Exactly. Also, if you're a CEO and you're making very big decisions and you're running a big company, you shouldn't have to feel the pressure to be the expert on everything. But you should surround yourself with people who are naturally curious, who have their arms uncrossed when there's a new thing and can experiment. And again, I actually highly recommend that all brands register their brand name on TikTok, just from a reputation management perspective. Yeah. But I don't necessarily recommend that you go make a bunch of organic content that you're not going to like have any ROI against. And I think that's where, again, as I'm learning in my career, I think trying to be a little more pragmatic and conservative of where we spend those limited resource hours.
So let's talk about the other direction. Let's talk about building teams. When you're working with teams to like build these social things, is it just as simple as saying like, you know, yeah, we're going to do this campaign and we're going to do this and that? They're like, yeah, I totally get it. Or do you have to like still like talk through the strategy and all those things and convince them that this is the right approach? And how do you do that?
So if your brand had a very big launch and you were going to host a press conference with 5 TV cameras, all the TV stations are there, and there's one microphone, you would not have your summer college intern stand at the microphone and deliver that big news. So if you're giving that intern the keys to your brand on the internet and saying, figure it out, it's not important to me, you've made a very big mistake. However, you're right. Like there is a semblance of digital nativism that comes with that generation. However, that doesn't necessarily mean just because you're of age that you're going to be great at it. Just like you and I, like maybe came of age in like the era of the newspaper, but are we great newspaper folks? I don't know. So that is where, like, as I'm hiring and even helping clients hire and interviewing their team for who will be their social leads or in their digital team, what I'm really looking for is not even experience, but also aptitude and curiosity. And, you know, the digital world has changed so much where, as much as I say I thought I wouldn't have a job, there are things that we were doing for brands that they can easily do themselves, that they shouldn't do now. And I don't want to be your community manager. You should be the voice of your own brand. Yeah. But when it comes to building Alexa skills or exploring machine learning or some visual technology, or we're working a lot with the augmented reality kits in phones right now, technology that you maybe have in-house. That's maybe not an expertise. So, but I want the people that you hire or the people on my team to be naturally curious about the what's next. What's coming next? So right now, if you open Google on your phone and you have a newer phone and you just search for the word horse, a little button will come up and it'll say, see this horse in 3D. And you push the button and magically, with no special app, no special download, you can put a hologram of a horse in your office, right where you're sitting right now. And this is not like, you don't even need the newest iPhone, right, to do this, or Android. So this is a native feature that Google is loading. So we spend a lot of time thinking about what our content is in video and in stills for brands. How much time have we spent thinking of 3D mapped content? If you have a product, do you have a really good 3D map of that product? Because theoretically in the future, when you Google yourself natively, there could be a function, or maybe something we buy in search engine marketing, where you can actually see that sandwich or see that bike or right whatever the thing is, right? So I don't know if that's true or not, but what I do know is that spending time, or having someone on your team spend time today to figure out how to get a 3D mapped asset of your product or service makes a lot of sense. And so I wouldn't spend a significant energy on that, but I'd spend 1% on that for sure. So I want to work with people and hire people and grow people who are naturally curious about that, and who are kind of looking around the corner and saying, I think it's maybe going here, so let's just learn. And if at the end of the day it doesn't, we still learned something. So within reason, that can be healthy.
Yeah, if you're leading a team, people are taking cues from you. So if you've got a negative attitude and you've got a pessimistic attitude about these things, it's going to be really hard to look back. Because I've seen this with other leaders before, where they're like, well, I hired smart people, and so they should just do it all. But then they still come and swoop and poop all the time and be like, like, where's the thing I wanted? And you're like, here it is. And they're like, that's not what I wanted. They're like, but that's what you said. Oh, okay. So I think to your point about being that, if you want to drive that curiosity, I think it has to start with you, right? That you have to be that curious person, and they're going to take those cues from you, right? Yeah.
So this year, my New Year's resolution was to learn email marketing. And just to be clear, it's still 2019, right? So email is like 45 years old.
Yeah.
But I've written the initial strategy for email, but I've never worked on email from the top of the strategy all the way down to every single week and looking at the reports. And so I learned it. And as a result, our whole team learned email. And as a result, I will tell you, I think email is the hotness in social media right now. Because of algorithms, because that on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, I really need to pay them so you can see my content, right? If you sign up for my email and I hit send, theoretically you get my email. So it's almost back to, if you like me and you follow me, you see my content. If you like me and you sign up for my email, you will get my content. And so I started my own weekly newsletter to learn this. We have a client that we're sending about 4 million emails a week for. And so we're getting to see it all the way through. And as a result, we're all thinking email all the time. Yeah. And it's 2019. But I'm really excited about there's new things coming in email. And again, I'm the guy that was like, we did the first Snapchat from outer space as a team. We've done some really out there stuff in social media. And for me to sit here and be like, email, I have to kick myself a little bit. But I think you're right, Kurt, that if you don't walk the walk and you don't show your team that you can be pragmatic, but also curious on these new technologies, they're not going to do it themselves. And a lot of times you get this question of well, what's your work-life balance? Because there's always something new. And how are you, when do you have the time? Yeah. And it's a lifestyle to be excited about what's next. Yeah. It's a lifestyle to wake up on Saturday morning and not have to go to the kids' soccer game for 2 hours. And you open your phone, or you flip up your laptop, or you watch the news and you see something cool. And then you send it to your team, or I put it in a folder to send it to them on Mondays. Sure. Right? So that's my compartmentalization. but I knew, and what's next, and then the context for that is not going to wait until you're ready on a Tuesday at 3 p.m. Yeah. And so you really have to live it, and it doesn't have to be laborious. It doesn't have to be punitive. It can be fun. And often so I'm using Yoshi for gas delivery right now. Yep. So I lead with, I've been off gas stations for 6 weeks. And people are like, what do you mean you're off gas stations? And it's oh, well, I have gas delivered to my car wherever it's parked, like Uber for gas. And it sparks this whole conversation of well, why would you do that? And it's $20 a month as a membership, and then the gas is just as cheap as anywhere else.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, is that worth it? And is it not? And it sparks all this conversation. And I love using that example because it's disrupting something you didn't think needed disruption. And if you look at your own business or your own product or service, like, it could be disrupted in a way you've never thought of before. And when I heard about Yoshi, I was busy on something else, and I bookmarked it for myself, and I finally tried it, and now it's become this great example of disrupting something you didn't think could be disrupted in a way that it's actually adding extreme value to my life, and also serves as a parallel to some B2B clients that haven't thought of how that technology is going to disrupt them.
How are you intentional about keeping that sort of, there is such this rise of a unplugging culture. I see, it's so funny to me because it's so many of them are posting things online talking about why you should unplug. But again, that's a whole other.
My unplugged Instagram vacation.
Yeah.
Look at this picture of me
look
not
at
on my phone.
Look at the 30 stories I just posted of me being unplugged. Yeah, I know, I kid, but again, it's not far off.
No.
But how do you personally find that time? Because like you said, everything is changing all the time. Everywhere, in any minute, a new Yoshi or something could show up, and where's Greg? He's going to miss it. Oh.
Yep. So I think it's three things. One is we have to be healthy, and as leaders, we have to be accountable to the expectations we're putting on people. Because number two, not everyone is wired to be on all the time.
No.
And look at where things, like, look around the corner and be excited and spend all weekend digging into something. Or my kids know me as, like, I brought Google Glass home. I brought a Microsoft HoloLens home. And I turned my whole living room into this, like, dingy warehouse. And my kids are getting to live this through me. And, like, it's part of our family is how I am. But if I'm putting that expectation on someone who's not wired that way, and I'm enforcing an unhealthy behavior on them, then I'm guilty of that, right? And so again, I'm trying to grow as a leader and be careful of that. But I think that the third thing is finding your tribe of people who think the same way. And Kurt, you and I are in some of that tribe there, where where I'm never going to see everything. But I have a group of friends who see things, and we talk about it, and we debate it, and we argue, and we hold each other accountable too. And I think that that's one of the things where I love to be first, and I love to download that new thing or buy that first thing. And a lot of times later, you find out the privacy implications, or you find out the unhealthy. Like, I guess we're all growing horns in the back of our necks now from staring down at our phones.
Yes. Yes, I heard the 5G is going to give us all cancer.
Yeah. So you can dismiss that, but also I want to be sure I have a group of people around me who's helping keep me accountable. And sometimes it can be hard to start that, especially if you feel like you're on an island at work, or if you're a leader, it can be hard to be vulnerable with other people. And so a lot of times that's like stepping outside of your workplace and finding a peer group where you can be really honest, and under like friend DA, right? Like an NDA between friends, where you can just say like, man, I'm really struggling with this, or we're looking to grow in this way, and we're hitting these problems. Or I've got someone who never unplugs ever, and I love it, but I'm afraid that they're going to burn out, or maybe you are burning out. And I think that unplug culture, like, it is a fad. It will come back around. However, so I'm online all day, every single day, unapologetically, as part of my life. And for 1 week a year, every February, I put my phone in a safe, and I do nothing for 1 week a year. And like, should I do more than that? I don't know. That's what I do now. And I've done it for 5 years. And the worst part of that week is that I don't have photos. And I use that time, and I read a ton of books, but that is a time to read fiction, right? I'm not, I highly recommend Team Human by Douglas Rushkoff, who's talking about reclaiming humanity through technology, not in spite of technology. That to me, that's not my unplug week book. I want to read post-apocalyptic fiction about when there's just no power because there's an EMP, right? Just crazy stuff. But again, I think across those three things, it's not ever going to slow down. In fact, some thought leaders have said this is maybe the slowest of technological change. And I think you could argue that the internet brought us so far that maybe we'll coast for a while.
Sure.
But if you look at what Elon Musk is doing with neural net, actually linking your brain to electronic decisions, like I think in our lifetime, and I hope that I live a while longer, I think that we'll see some very big things. So if you look, the oldest woman in the world, her name's Kane Tanaka. She's from Japan, and she was born prematurely, but born the same year that the Wright brothers achieved flight. So can you imagine what she has experienced
in one lifetime,
in her lifetime? Like between the long distance telephones and airplane travel and Jurassic Park, like we've invented magic since she's been born.
Basically magic.
And so it's why I ask, like, I love to ask my clients and my peers, like, your first computer, your first phone, your first social network, because I think that helps shape and imprint you. And in our lifetime, we're going to see such drastic change. And so we have to be open to that, and we can be pragmatic about it, but we have to be open to it because it's going to significantly change in our lifetime. And I personally am very excited about that.
Yeah.
Bill Gates says we tend to overestimate the change in the next 2 years and underestimate the change in the next 10. Mm-hmm. So I believe if you're not living in the center of change, you've already been left behind. Digital's a pretty safe bet for where things are going,
I would imagine.
And I had clients in 2010 who had, I can think of one government client in particular, who the majority of their website traffic was desktop, and they said, we don't need a WAP site, right? Nope. A mobile-enabled site. Look at our traffic. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, but look at the consumer behavior. Mm-hmm. Look at where things are moving from that attention economy, and they're moving to the phone. And there's more advanced technology in our phones today than sent the first man on the moon. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that rocket ship wasn't worthy, and that doesn't necessarily mean that my phone is better, but it's doing a different job, and I use it in a different way. And so I want to study where people are going next and then make some strategic bets. So if your brand does not yet have a mobile responsive website in 2019, it's a pretty good investment for 2020 to put that on the roadmap.
Yeah, I would think so. People look at analytics and say, this is all past tense data, but they look at it like this will dictate our future too. And I think that's where I see some brands, organizations, even startups sort of plateau, is because they're like, yep, this is what everybody's doing, so we need to change these few things, and then that will make that better.
So that Henry Ford quote, if you ask people what they want, they'd ask for a faster horse.
Mm-hmm. But again, it's like if they are all going through this experience on the website, for example, and they're not clicking through these things, well, then I'll just change these things. Mm-hmm. But instead, what I've seen really successful organizations do is they look at what does that tell me about trajectory, where we're going, and what opportunities we can find. I think that's always been the challenge because the data is safe.
Mm-hmm. It's hard as a leader because you can't just make strategic bets left and right. You have to have data behind them, but we also have to know where we're going.
So, Greg, if I want to find out more about the work that Greg's doing, where's a good place to go? Where are you most active? I mean, you obviously just said all these different places. Should I follow you on TikTok? Is that a good place to...
No, you can follow my daughter on TikTok because we have a deal that if she reaches so many followers, she gets a hamster. Oh, this is the new modern parenting, right? Is where your kids set follower limits. Yeah. What she doesn't understand is I have her account severely locked down, so you can't do that.
Can we make that deal? Because I could use a hamster. If I get a certain amount of followers on TikTok, Greg's going to owe me a hamster. I'll just say I'm recording it right now.
My website is gregswan.net, and you can sign up for my weekly email at bit.ly/GregSwan email, or if you just go to gregswan.net, you can get that. Send an email every single Friday, and I taught myself MailChimp, and I'm learning how it works, and so sign up there, and then I'll track what you click on and where it goes and try to learn more about how I can offer value.
That's awesome, Greg. Thanks for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Kurt. It's been awesome.
Thank you for listening to The Schmidt List. If you want to learn more about how Foundry accelerates innovation, check out foundrymakes.com. And if you'd like me to speak about establishing a growth mindset at your conference or with your team, drop me a note at kurt@foundrymakes.com. Oh, and the next time you're on the internet, head to iTunes and leave the show a review. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, because sharing is caring. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show, and I hope you have a fantastic week.